We are going to begin with Fox News. Just minutes before the trial was set to start, Fox News and Dominion Voting Systems settled their defamation case. Fox agreed to pay Dominion $787.5 million for repeatedly telling lies about election fraud on their network. Here's what Dominion CEO said about it on GMA.
It's a big step forward in democracy if we can, our system can send a signal that if media companies lie, whoever they are, on whatever channel it is, and they do so knowingly, they will be prepared to pay a very, very high price.
Well, Fox also admitted it was in the wrong, or they were in the wrong, sort of, saying, quote, "We acknowledge the court's rulings, finding certain claims about Dominion to be false. This settlement reflects Fox's continued commitment to the highest journalistic standards." Now, there's a lot to talk about here. So for more on this landmark case and the surprise settlement, we want to go straight to the source. Please welcome former CNN anchor and special correspondent for Vanity Fair covering this case. He's also a New York Times best-selling author, Brian Stelter. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for being here, Brian. I'm curious to know why you think they agreed to this settlement. Just purely because this is an opinion show. I'm mad about it. I think there should have been an apology at least, or news taken out of Fox News. Seems like they got half of what they were asking for, and that's it, and I'm mad.
Yeah, well, I feel like this is one of those cases where rich people always get out of something the same way. They always just pay money to make the problem go away. Rupert Murdoch is a great example of that. You know, he's this billionaire, 92-year-old patriarch of Fox. His son runs the company day by day, but Rupert is the face of Fox, and he was going to have to testify. He was going to have to show up in court in a couple of days in Delaware. Now, we have not even seen him on camera in a while. For all we know, you know, he's having a hard time with his health. He doesn't want to be testifying. So I think, why did they pay? Why did they pay? To get him to avoid the stand, to get Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity to avoid testifying, and just to make this go away, because it was going to be in the news for 6 more weeks. And now Fox will start to get out of the news.
Right. And let me ask you this, just to follow up on that. Fox's primetime anchors maybe having to take the stand. I'm with you. That would have been horrific, and having to hear it over and over and over again. But why did Dominion say we're going to settle? And why did they settle for half is what they wanted?
You're absolutely right. That is the more interesting part of it, right? Fox wanted to settle the entire time. They've wanted to settle for 2 years. But when I would speak with Dominion lawyers, they swore up and down they were determined to get this to trial. I think the reality, though, is that Fox basically had no strong arguments for why those lies aired on TV, but they did have some decent arguments that Dominion should not get $1.6 billion. That Dominion was absurdly inflating how damaged it was. So I think essentially Fox was meeting Dominion in the middle by saying, okay, we will pay you almost half of what you want. And that's actually a lot more than a jury might have awarded them. Let's just remember, what is a settlement, right? Both sides are settling. They're having to settle. Neither side is entirely happy with this, but at the end of the day, Dominion wanted that money.
Okay, so no one's happy, especially Tory. But, okay, people are saying $787.5 million seems like a lot of money, but is it really a lot of money for a company like Fox?
Even for Fox, it hurts. I mean, even for Fox, they can afford it, but it still hurts. This is the largest defamation payout by any media company in American history. There's been nothing like this before. It's very, very hard to sue a company, a news outlet, and win for defamation, and for good reason. But, you know, in this case, Dominion was able to get the money because Fox had committed such egregious behavior on the air. But for Fox, look, Fox has a market cap of $16 billion. Yes, they can afford this. But it's going to hurt. I mean, it's going to hurt. They're probably going to take a loss for the quarter as a result. They're not able to invest this money. Think about what if I gave you $787 million, right, and you were a company, you could do a lot with that money. You could invest it. You could hire journalists. Fox won't be doing any of that.
I'm just thinking of all the ways I could spend $787.5
There we go.
My question is, can't you round up or down? What's with the 0.5 on the end? That's what
I wondered that too. It must
what I'm
have been
concerned.
a complicated Excel spreadsheet, right? Where the two sides are going back and forth. Because we know what happened on Tuesday, and then during the day, there was a mediator going back and forth with numbers, and Dominion kept pushing harder for another $5 million, another $10 million. So it must have been some spreadsheet math they eventually did.
I didn't expect you to have an answer to that, but you did.
You've seen Selling Sunset. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
0.5 made somebody happy.
Not Selling Sunset.
Let's get back to Brian while we got him. Some say this was a victory for free speech, that Fox hosts were just reporting on newsworthy election fraud claims. What do you say to that?
Well, I was at CNN at the time, and I remember that post-election period very vividly. The reality is that people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, who were on TV making up these smears about Dominion, did not have a lot of credibility. I know 20 years ago, Rudy had a lot of credibility, but he had squandered a lot of it in recent years. So as a journalist, you've got to decide, is your source reliable? Is your source trustworthy? And the reality is the sources Fox was relying on, was using, they were not reliable. They were not trustworthy. And in the discovery process for this case, we saw lots of evidence. The people at Fox knew it. They would call some of these people crazy. They would make fun of these sources behind the scenes. So that's, I think, ultimately why this was so damning for Fox and why Fox was desperate to settle.
So let me ask you this, Brian. For folks who get all their news from Fox, do you think they will ever learn the truth, that they were lied to, or are they even aware of this story?
I think maybe vaguely aware. I think, look, there are a lot of Republicans who are with Trump no matter what. But then there's also a lot of other Republicans who don't believe the big lie, who don't think he won in 2020, who maybe don't like him personally, but just want his policies. And I think that's kind of how it works with Fox as well. Sure, there's going to be some folks who will never turn the channel, never try other sources. But then there's lots of Fox fans, lots of Republican voters who also turn on ABC or turn on this show, and they want to hear other points of view. So that's kind of my optimistic attitude toward this, is that we can't talk about folks like they're all the same. Sure, there's someone's proverbial uncle who will never turn off Fox, but there's other people who are more open to other points of view and other arguments and other information. And frankly, that's going to be a challenge for Donald Trump now that he's running for office again.
Yeah, how did we get some of those viewers? Never turn off DBL. I want that, uncle. That sounded weird.
You
Let's
did.
go.
It sounded so weird.
So let's speak in hypotheticals for a second. What do you think would have happened to Fox if this had gone to trial?
It would have been excruciating, because not only would Murdoch have been up there, so would have the stars like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. Even some of the folks that were fired from Fox, like Lou Dobbs, would have been testifying. And, they would have been asked under oath a lot of questions about how the place worked and how the place didn't work. What do you really think of Donald Trump? What did you really think of that and this? So it, would have been like a 6-week confession. It would have been a 6-week reading of someone's most private diary. And obviously Fox did not want that.
Yeah.
It could have been really cathartic for them, though. Get it all out.
It would have been cathartic for
the campfire.
It would have been cathartic for the truth and for viewers. That's what it would have been cathartic for.
Well, listen, Brian, we're going to ask you to stick around because we've got more questions about this case and how cable news networks really work. Just in general, we'll be right back. We're back with former CNN anchor and best-selling author Brian Stelter. He's covering the Fox News defamation lawsuit for Vanity Fair. So let's get right back into it. Jeff,
yes,
you have a
Brian,
question.
thanks for sticking around for us. So let's talk about cable news in general. There are lots of people watching, including me, to be perfectly honest, watching our show right now, that MSNBC, CNN, Fox, all have lied. And not in this case in particular, I believe Fox lied, but in general, they have equal bias. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, number one, if people feel that way, if people feel they were lied about, then they could sue and they could try the way Dominion did. But there's never been a defamation suit against MSNBC or CNN that was anything like this one with Dominion. So there is recourse, right? If a public figure feels they've been defamed, they can try to go to court. And yes, the bar is set high, but Dominion was able basically to clear that high bar. I think when it comes to MSNBC and CNN, they're just different from Fox because they have more of a news muscle. And yes, MSNBC has lots of liberal opinion shows. And yes, CNN has a bunch of talk shows, shows that are more about talking than about news. And I love those. I'm on one of those right now, so I love those. But I think what's different about Fox is their news muscles aren't as strong. They've let their news muscles atrophy because a lot of the journalists there have left over the years. They have not felt welcome anymore. And stars like Sean Hannity are very hostile to journalism and hostile to Fox's reporters. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I want CNN and NBC and all of them to be really strong with their news gathering so that when something really bad or really good happens in the world, they can cover it well. And that is the challenge for Fox. They've become so identified as only an opinion brand that they've let the news part slide.
And I think what frustrates me is, listen, I'm with you. I want this to be a precedent. But I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between an opinion show and a news show. And I know there's a difference between bias and disinformation. And I want that to be crystal clear because disinformation can lead to dangerous situations like the insurrection. So I just want to put that out there, Brian, and if you want to elaborate on it, please do, but I think that's something that needs to be underscored.
Yeah, and I think when I think about my time at CNN, there were times where I was reporting the news in one sentence, and then the next sentence I was providing a point of view. So it is almost impossible to untangle news and opinion. It's almost impossible to separate them, and I don't think most viewers actually want that. They want people they can trust to tell them what's going on and why it matters, which sometimes means providing perspective and analysis. And TV is moving, frankly, more and more in that direction, I think, not less and less in that direction.
Absolutely.
But there is a huge, huge difference between point of view and disinformation, between point of view and propaganda. By the way, news outlets, they make mistakes all the time. I made lots of mistakes at CNN. But as long as they're honest mistakes, that makes news outlets get better and go stronger and get healthier. The difference with Fox was they seemed to want to convince their viewers of a lie to make their viewers feel better. And ultimately, that's actually really rude. That's actually really mean to the viewers. It's actually disrespectful to the audience.
It's insulting. It's absolutely insulting.
It's insulting.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about this because a lot of people don't understand actual malice, which is part of defamation. And a lot of the case came down to Fox deciding to report and comment on what Fox thought its audiences wanted to hear, right? We saw that in text messages saying some of these people were reckless, we don't trust them. Do you think other cable news networks do the same thing? Or is this specifically a Fox, and I don't say Fox News, I say Fox problem?
Yeah, there's an old slogan Carl Bernstein likes to say. Of course, Bernstein famous from Watergate. He says, every day we're reporting the best obtainable version of the truth. That's different than the truth, right? Because we can't always get the entire truth when there's breaking news or when there's fast-moving developments. I had lots of times at CNN where we were only able to know part of the truth and the fuller story came out later. But as long as you're acting in good faith
Right,
and
the
trying to
intention,
get the
right.
truth, that's what matters. And in this case, not all the stars at Fox, by the way, were in the wrong. There are some personalities there that were doing really good work after the election, but there were a few of these hosts, like Maria Bartiromo and Jeanine Pirro, who were playing into a conspiracy theory about Dominion, and that's why actual malice was the standard, that they were acting recklessly with what they were doing.
Yeah, there was intention behind it. I think that's important for people to know.
I have a quick question. Where in New York are you? That looks, I've lived all over New York City. It never looked like that.
So random.
The background
It doesn't say
question?
You look so relaxed.
I was in New York this morning, but now I'm in New Jersey, so maybe I hope I didn't commit misinformation.
Well done.
But you know what? As long as we're honest, as long as we correct, as
The
long as we
intention was good. Thank you. Yes, yes.
Brian,
actually-
that was good stuff, man. I really want to thank you for
really
coming on
was.
because you're giving an honest opinion. People think CNN journalist has a biased opinion. You really gave some honest answers here, and I
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
He was
thank you.
gracious. And Sherry, I just want to read one of our comments from our viewers. Sherry Darden says, if the mistake creates a retraction, then good. But to dig your heels in is insulting. Kind of echoing what you and Brian were talking about.
Yes.
That's great. Brian Stelter, thank you so much for joining us and breaking down this case. If you want to hear more from Brian on this, he's got a podcast with Vanity Fair that's
cool.
covering it, all the details. Also, keep your eyes peeled for a new book from Brian. It's a follow-up to his best-selling book, Hoax, and we'll take a deep dive into all of this. Brian, thanks again. We'll be right back.
Congrats
Thanks,
on the
Brian.
book.